The Singing House. This is a true story. I don't expect you to believe all of it, but I'm asking you to listen. Because what happened to my family over the past 2 years cost my mother her life, and we're still not safe. 3 months. That's how long it took for the singing to drive my mother to suicide. And the thing that killed her, it's still in our house, waiting for the next one of us to break. I can still smell it, the wet, rotting stench that filled the house the night she died. I can still hear that little girl's voice humming, "When you wish upon a star in the darkness." And every time I close my eyes, I see her face at the window with no eyes staring back. At first we told ourselves it was just the TV, maybe a neighbor's radio, maybe we were all just tired. But deep down we knew. You always know when something's wrong in your own home. My name is Daniel Torres. I'm 24 years old and I'm a software engineer, or at least I was trying to be. 6 months ago, my company passed me over for a promotion I desperately needed. The rejection stung, but the financial stress that followed was worse. I couldn't afford to move out, couldn't afford my own place. So I stayed. Remote work from my childhood bedroom in a house that was slowly falling apart, just like my career prospects. I lived with my family in San Antonio, Texas. Our house sits at 2847 Crescent Hill Drive, a 2-story structure built in 1985 that my parents bought in 2005. It's nothing special. Beige siding, small front yard, a backyard that slopes into a wooded area where we used to play as kids. The kind of middle-class neighborhood where people keep to themselves, where houses are spaced just far enough apart that you can't hear your neighbors through the walls. That distance would matter later. My father, Mateo Torres, is 52. He used to own a chain of video rental stores back when that was still a viable business. VHS tapes, DVDs, the smell of popcorn and plastic cases. He loved it. But by 2005, the writing was on the wall. Streaming killed the video store star, as they say. He sold everything, took whatever job he could find. Now he works inventory at a warehouse, and I can see the shame in his eyes every time someone asks what he does. He tries to be the strong father, the provider, but the weight of failure has bent his shoulders. My mother, Carmen Torres, was 48. She stayed home, managed the house, tried to hold us together. She had anxiety, the kind that came with medication and therapy appointments she could barely afford. Social interaction exhausted her. Most days she'd talk to the checkout clerk at the grocery store and consider that her quota for human contact filled. The house was her world, her sanctuary, until it became her prison. My sister Isabella just turned 16. She's quiet, introverted, the kind of kid who'd rather read than go to parties. School wasn't easy for her. Not bullying exactly, but that low-level social exclusion that teenagers excel at. She came home most days looking like she'd survived a battle. Home was where she could breathe, where she felt safe. That safety was an illusion. We also had my grandmother's room. Abuela Luz died 4 years ago, but we kept everything exactly as she left it. Her rosary on the nightstand, her clothes still in the closet, photos of family long dead watching from the walls. The room had one peculiar feature: no windows. Just 4 walls, a single door, and air that always felt heavier than the rest of the house. We rarely went in there. It felt disrespectful somehow, like disturbing a tomb. That room would become the only place in the house where we felt even remotely protected. The house itself had personality, if you can call the groans of old pipes and settling foundations personality. The carpet in the living room was original beige, stained in places we'd long stopped trying to clean. My father's ancient CRT television sat on a wooden stand surrounded by shelves of VHS tapes he couldn't bring himself to throw away, remnants of his former life. The air conditioning unit rattled like it was trying to shake itself apart, but we couldn't afford to replace it. You learned to sleep through the noise. Upstairs, the hallway creaked with every step. 4 doors: master bedroom, Isabella's room, the bathroom, and Abuela Luz's room at the end. A window at the far end of the hall looked out over the backyard and the woods beyond. During the day, light streamed through. At night it became a black mirror reflecting only darkness. The fluorescent light in the hallway had a habit of flickering whenever someone used the bathroom sink. Electrical issue, my father said. We'd get it fixed eventually. We never did. Our neighborhood was predominantly white, and we were one of maybe 3 Hispanic families on the block. People were polite enough, waves from driveways, nods while checking the mail, but there was no real connection. No borrowing cups of sugar or backyard barbecues. When everything started happening, that isolation would become suffocating. The house smelled like old books and faint mildew, a scent so familiar I only noticed it when I came home after being away. The walls were thin enough that you could hear someone walking in the room above you, but thick enough that conversation stayed private. Usually. I'm telling you all this so you understand we were normal. Struggling, sure. Stressed about money and work and school. But normal. The kind of family you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Sunday, March 14th, 2023 at 9:47 p.m. Everything changed. It was movie night, a tradition my father insisted on maintaining even as we all grew older and drifted into our separate worlds. He'd pulled out one of his prized VHS tapes, The People Under the Stairs, from 1991. A horror movie, ironically. Isabella and I had picked it because we were in the mood for something creepy, something that would give us a safe little thrill before bed. My mother made popcorn in the microwave, the smell of butter filling the kitchen. We settled into our usual spots, my father in his recliner, my mother on the couch, Isabella and I on the floor with pillows. The opening credits rolled. We laughed at the dated special effects. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. At 9:52 p.m., the air conditioning unit shuddered and went silent. My father sighed, that particular exhale of a man calculating repair costs he couldn't afford. Great. Now we gotta fix that. Nobody else commented. The AC died at least once a month. You learn to live with it. And 3 minutes later, the kitchen light flickered. My mother glanced toward the doorway. The wiring in this house. A statement, not quite a complaint. Just acknowledgement of another thing slowly breaking down around us. We kept watching the movie. At 10:03 p.m., I heard it first, humming. Faint, melodic, the tune, instantly recognizable, When You Wish Upon a Star from Pinocchio. A child's voice, sweet and pure, drifting from somewhere above us. I didn't say anything immediately. My mind went through the logical explanations, the TV audio bleeding through, though we'd paused the movie. A video clip Isabella might be watching on her phone, though she was sitting right next to me, phone face down on the carpet. My mother humming absent-mindedly, except she was motionless, her face already tilted toward the ceiling. Isabella noticed next. She looked at me with confusion creasing her forehead. "Do you hear that?" My mother's hand found my father's arm. Her fingers tightened. Mateo grabbed the remote and paused the movie. The humming continued crystal clear now that our horror film had gone silent. A little girl singing each note perfect, each breath between phrases just slightly wrong, too measured, too controlled. "Is that the TV?" Mateo asked. But his voice had already lost its conviction. He knew. We all knew. Isabella suggested, "Maybe Mrs. Chen's TV next door," but Mrs. Chen was 73 and mostly deaf. And even if she were watching something at full volume, you wouldn't hear it through the walls like this. Not with this clarity. My mother's voice came out small. Could be a kid outside. I looked at the digital clock on the cable box. 10:07 p.m., Sunday night. No children played outside at this hour. No children played outside in our neighborhood at any hour, really. The nearest family with young kids lived 4 houses down, and their daughter was a teenager now. The singing was coming from inside the house, from upstairs, from the second floor where nobody should be. The voice belonged to a girl maybe 6 or 7 years old. The pitch was perfect, the tone beautiful, in that effortless way children sing before self-consciousness ruins it. But underneath the melody, something felt wrong. The breaths she took between phrases were too deep, too deliberate, like someone manually pumping air through a mechanism rather than natural respiration. My father stood. "Everyone stay here." He tried to sound calm, authoritative, but I heard the tremor underneath. I'd heard that tremor once before when I was 8, and we'd thought someone had broken into the house. It turned out to be a raccoon in the garage. This time felt different. "Dad, I'll come with you." I stood before he could argue. Isabella grabbed my arm. "Don't." But she didn't elaborate on why. The fear in her eyes said enough. Mateo and I climbed the stairs together. With each step, the old wood announced our presence with groans and pops that seemed deafening in the new silence. Because the singing had stopped the moment we started up. The upstairs hallway stretched before us in darkness. The fluorescent light had burned out yesterday, another repair on the endless list. My father pulled out his phone and activated the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness but somehow made the shadows deeper. We checked Isabella's room first. Door open, lights off. Her bed neatly made. Window closed and latched. The curtains hung still. Nothing. The master bedroom next. My father pushed open the door and we both flinched at the creak. His flashlight swept across the room. Their bed. My mother's nightstand cluttered with pill bottles and a glass of water. My father's side bare, except for a lamp. The curtains were drawn motionless. The closet door stood open as it always did. My mother feared closed closet doors, a childhood phobia she'd never outgrown. Empty. The bathroom revealed only the usual clutter of toothbrushes and medications. The shower curtain hung limp, no one hiding in the tub. That left Abuela Luz's room at the end of the hall. The door was closed. It was always closed. We'd developed an unspoken rule about not opening it unnecessarily, as if disturbing the stillness would somehow dishonor my grandmother's memory. My father's hand hesitated on the doorknob. I could see the conflict on his face, the need to check warring with the desire to leave this particular room alone. Finally, he twisted the knob and pushed. The smell hit me first. Lavender and old clothes, that particular scent of a room undisturbed for years. Everything sat exactly as it always had. My grandmother's bed with its floral comforter, the dresser with her hairbrush still holding strands of gray hair, the closet door closed. No windows, so no moonlight, just the invading beam from my father's phone. I stared at the bed. The comforter looked wrinkled, as if someone had been sitting there. But that might have been my imagination. Or maybe it had looked that way for years and I'd never noticed. "Nothing," my father said, but he didn't sound relieved. He sounded like a man trying to convince himself. We went back downstairs. My mother and Isabella sat frozen on the couch exactly where we'd left them. Their eyes tracked our descent with desperate hope. "No one up there," Mateo announced, settling back into his recliner. But his hand shook when he picked up the remote. He pressed play and the movie resumed. None of us watched it. My mother stared at the ceiling as if she could see through it to the rooms above. Isabella clutched a throw pillow to her chest, knuckles white. My father's eyes were fixed on the screen, but his gaze was distant, unfocused. I tried the popcorn. It tasted like ash. Or maybe that was just my mouth gone dry. Every sound from the house made us jump. The refrigerator motor cycling on, a car passing outside, the house settling with its usual pops and creaks that I'd lived with for 18 years, but now sounded like footsteps, like doors opening, like whispers. The movie ended. I couldn't tell you what happened in the last hour because I didn't retain a single scene. We said our goodnights and everyone went to their rooms, but nobody slept. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening. At 2:17 a.m., I heard what might have been giggling from the hallway. High and quick, barely audible. I didn't move, didn't investigate. Just pulled my blanket tighter and told myself it was pipes groaning in the walls. That night I learned something about fear. It has a smell, metallic like blood mixed with sweat. And once that scent gets into a house, into the walls and carpet and curtains, it never fully leaves. Our home smelled like fear after that Sunday night. We didn't talk about the singing for 2 days. Not at breakfast, not at dinner. We moved through our routines pretending nothing had happened, but the pretense was tissue thin. Isabella jumped every time someone came up behind her. My mother kept looking over her shoulder. My father checked every room before bed, though he tried to be casual about it. I worked at my desk, headphones on, trying to focus on code, but I kept pausing my music to listen, just to make sure I heard if it started again. On Tuesday, March 16th at 10:15 p.m., it did. I was in my room typing noise-canceling headphones, creating the illusion of solitude. I'd taken them off to grab water from the bathroom when I heard the screaming. Not singing this time. Screaming. My mother's voice high and raw with terror coming from the master bedroom. I ran. Isabella burst from her room at the same time, and we nearly collided in the hallway. Inside our parents' room, we found my father holding my mother, her body shaking violently, her face buried in his chest. She was sobbing, hyperventilating, words tumbling out too fast to understand. It was there. It was right there, right at the window. Mateo looked at us over her head, his face pale. She had a nightmare. But his eyes told a different story. His eyes were locked on the window beside their bed, the window that looked out at nothing but night air and a 20-foot drop to the ground below. I followed his gaze. The curtains hung open. The window was a black rectangle reflecting the room's interior. For just a moment, less than a second, I saw something in that reflection that shouldn't have been there. A small face, white, where the eyes should have been only darkness, and a smile far too wide. I blinked and it was gone. Just the normal reflection of the bedroom, with my father holding my mother Isabella and me standing in the doorway, everyone frozen in tableau. "Dad?" Isabella's voice was small, childlike, in a way I hadn't heard since she was 10. Mateo's response came out strangled. "Go to Abuela Luz's room, both of you. Sleep there tonight." But now we went. As we left, I heard my mother's voice muffled against my father's chest. She was smiling at me, just smiling, like she was happy I was scared. Isabella and I dragged blankets and pillows into our grandmother's room. The air felt thicker there, harder to breathe, but also somehow safer, like the weight of it would keep other things out. We lay down on opposite sides of the bed, not touching, both of us staring at the ceiling. "Daniel," Isabella whispered into the darkness. "Yeah." "What's happening to us?" I didn't have an answer. So I said what you're supposed to say when you're the older brother: "Everything's going to be okay." It was the first lie I told her about this. It wouldn't be the last. We fell asleep eventually, exhaustion overriding fear. When I woke at 6:30 a.m. to my alarm, sunlight was streaming under the door from the hallway. Everything seemed absurd in daylight. Ghosts and singing children and faces in windows. Stupid horror movie logic that doesn't survive the dawn. But downstairs, my mother sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, staring at nothing. She'd been crying. Her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy. When I asked if she wanted breakfast, she didn't answer, just kept staring. My father came down 10 minutes later. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. He kissed the top of my mother's head and whispered something I couldn't hear. She nodded without looking at him. Over the next week, we fell into a new routine built around avoidance. We spent as little time at home as possible. I worked from coffee shops. Isabella stayed late at the library. My father took extra shifts. My mother was the only one who couldn't escape. Where would she go? On Friday, March 19th at 6:34 p.m., I learned that whatever was in our house wasn't content to stay upstairs anymore. I was carrying my laptop from my bedroom to the living room, planning to work with the TV on for background noise, a bad habit I developed during the pandemic. I had to pass through the dining room, that transitional space between the kitchen and living area that we rarely used except during holidays. In my peripheral vision, I caught a flash of white on the dining table, just a flicker enough to make me glance sideways without fully turning my head. What I saw froze me mid-step. A child sat on our dining table, not on a chair but crouched on the table itself like an animal. a little girl in a white dress, her dark hair hanging around her face. Her hands were clasped together in front of her, rubbing against each other in that particular way that made me think of an insect grooming itself. Her head was down, but I could sense, absolutely sense, that she was smiling. I didn't breathe, didn't move. Some instinct told me that if I looked directly at her, she'd vanish. Or worse, she'd do something else. So I kept my gaze averted, seeing her only in that peripheral space where movement lives. She began to stand, slowly, so slowly that every second stretched into an eternity. Her body unfolded from its crouch, rising vertically like a figure on strings being pulled from above. And she kept rising, past where a child's head should be, past where even an adult's head should be. Her neck bent. The angle was wrong, impossible. She had to crane her head down to fit under our 8-foot ceiling, her spine curving in a way that would have snapped a living person's vertebrae. A sound escaped my throat. Not quite a scream, not quite a word, just a vocalization of pure terror. "Mom!" I didn't shout it, I whispered it, the way a child whispers for their mother in the dark, hoping she'll hear without alerting whatever else might be listening. Isabella heard me anyway. She came running from her room, her footsteps pounding down the stairs. "What's wrong?" The moment she spoke, the pressure in the room changed. My ears popped. The thing on the table, the girl, the entity, whatever it was, simply wasn't there anymore. Not fading, not moving, just absent as if she'd never existed at all. I stood there shaking, laptop clutched to my chest, staring at the empty table. Isabella grabbed my shoulders. "Daniel, you're scaring me." What happened? But how do you explain what you've seen when it defies explanation? How do you tell your little sister that something wearing the shape of a child was perched on your dining table too? Tall joints bending wrong, smiling in the darkness of its bowed head. "Call Dad," I managed. "Tell him to come home. Now." She pulled out her phone without argument. While she made the call, I kept staring at the table. The wood surface showed nothing unusual. No footprints, no marks. But I swear I could still feel the weight of its presence, the way a room feels different after someone's been in it, molecules of air still holding their shape. That night my father came home early. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression carefully neutral, but I saw his hands tighten on the steering wheel of his parked truck. We sat in the driveway for 20 minutes, neither of us wanting to go inside. "Maybe we should get the house checked," he finally said. "Carbon monoxide or something, hallucinations." But he didn't believe that. I could hear it in his voice. And I knew why he suggested it, because carbon monoxide was something you could fix, something logical and manageable. Not like this. Not like whatever was happening to us. That weekend passed in tense silence. We started leaving lights on in every room, day and night. The electric bill would be brutal, but none of us could stand the darkness anymore. My mother barely left the master bedroom. When she did venture out, she moved quickly, eyes darting to corners and doorways. Sunday morning, she asked my father if we could move. He explained gently that we couldn't afford it. The house was barely worth its mortgage. We had no savings for a deposit somewhere else. We were trapped here by economics as much as anything else. My mother nodded, and something in her eyes went dim, like she'd accepted a death sentence. On March 21st at 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of my mother screaming again. But this time when I ran to their room, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, rocking back and forth, my father's hands on her shoulders, trying to stop the shaking. "She touched me," my mother gasped. "She sat on the bed and she touched me." My father and I both looked at my mother's left ankle, visible below her pajama pants, a handprint, small, child-sized. The bruise was already forming dark purple against her brown skin, each finger distinctly outlined. The edges looked almost frostbitten, the skin there taking on a grayish tint. That mark stayed on my mother's ankle for 3 weeks, long after bruises should fade. Every time she looked at it, I saw her flinch, saw her retreat further into herself. We called a priest. Father Patrick Sullivan, an elderly man who'd baptized both Isabella and me decades ago, came to our house on a Thursday afternoon. He walked through each room with holy water and prayers, his voice strong despite his age. He spent extra time in Abuela Luz's room, kneeling there for nearly 40 minutes. When he finished, he told us, "I've blessed your home. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it isn't." "What do you mean, isn't?" my father asked. Father Patrick's rheumy eyes met his. "Some presences don't respond to blessings. Some have anchored themselves too deeply. If this continues, call me again. I know someone with more experience in these matters." He left, and for 3 days the house was quiet. We started to hope, started to breathe easier. My mother even smiled once, a real smile, when Isabella showed her a funny video on her phone. Then, on Sunday, March 28th, we came home from dinner at my father's friend's house to find our entire home had been violated. The front door was locked just as we'd left it. No broken windows, no forced entry. But inside, chaos. Specifically, Isabella's chaos. Her belongings were scattered everywhere. Her diary lay open on the living room coffee table, turned to the page where she had written about our mother, about how scared she was, about how she didn't know if Mom would be okay. Personal photos from her room were scattered across the stairs. Pictures of her and her best friend Maya, selfies she'd never shown anyone, private moments now exposed. Letters Maya had written were pinned to the walls with kitchen knives, the blades driven into the drywall. Isabella's childhood stuffed animals, the ones she kept hidden in her closet because she was too old for them but couldn't bear to throw away, were arranged in a circle on the dining room floor like some kind of ritual. Her clothes were everywhere, draped over furniture, hanging from light fixtures, a trail leading up the stairs. Her underwear hung from the ceiling fan in the living room. Isabella saw that and broke, just completely broke. She crumpled to the floor, sobbing, her hands covering her face. "They touched my things. They read my diary. They know everything about me." But the worst part, the part that made even my father's face go pale, was Isabella's first communion dress. She'd worn it 10 years ago, and my mother had carefully preserved it in a sealed plastic garment bag, stored it in a box in the back of Isabella's closet. That dress now stood in the middle of the living room, not lying on the floor, standing, upright and vertical, as if an invisible body were wearing it, the fabric holding a human shape without any visible support. We all stared at it. Nobody moved. The dress swayed slightly, a gentle rocking motion like someone shifting their weight from foot to foot. My father made a strangled sound and went downstairs to get a broom and dustpan. When he came back up, he was carrying the dress. "It was floating," he said, his voice hollow. "I saw it in the dark. Just standing there floating like someone was wearing it. When I turned on the light, it fell to the floor. The smell hit us then. Putrefaction. The smell of meat rotting in summer heat, of death and decay. It poured off the dress in waves, making us gag. There was no rational source for that smell. The dress had been sealed in plastic in a closet. It should have smelled like storage and old fabric, nothing more. We spent hours cleaning, putting Isabella's belongings back, trying to restore order to the chaos. But you can't restore violated privacy. You can't unknow that something went through your most personal possessions, read your innermost thoughts, touched everything that mattered to you. That night, none of us slept. We sat together in Abuela Luz's room, all 4 of us, and waited for dawn. My mother held Isabella, who'd stopped crying but had gone eerily quiet. My father sat with his back against the door, as if he could physically bar entry to whatever was hunting us. And in the silence, broken only by occasional sirens from the street outside, I finally accepted the truth I'd been avoiding. We were not alone in our house. Something was here with us. Something that knew us, watched us, violated our privacy and our peace. Something that wanted us to know it was here. That wanted us afraid. The morning brought no relief, just the harsh reality of daylight showing the damage more clearly. Isabella wouldn't go into her room. She gathered clothes from the hallway where they'd been tossed and changed in the bathroom, then went to school without eating breakfast. My mother didn't even try to pretend she was okay anymore. She just sat at the kitchen table, staring at her hands, occasionally touching the fading bruise on her ankle. My father called Father Patrick. The priest said he'd return with help with someone more experienced. He promised to come back next week. We had to survive until then. That was 9 days ago. 9 days of escalating terror, of sleep deprivation, of watching my mother deteriorate hour by hour. 9 days of wondering what would happen next, of dreading nightfall, of flinching at every sound. But what happened after those 9 days was worse than anything I could have imagined. Because some things don't just want to scare you, some things want to break you completely, and they'll use whoever's weakest to do it. For us, that was my mother, and they were just getting started. I need to tell you something about living with terror. It's not like the movies where there's a crescendo of violins and a jump scare that makes you spill your popcorn. Real terror is slow, it's corrosive. It eats away at you one sleepless night at a time until you don't recognize yourself in the mirror anymore. My mother stopped recognizing herself after 2 weeks. April came with the kind of spring weather San Antonio is famous for: warm days, cool nights, bluebonnets blooming along the highways. The world outside our house continued as if nothing was wrong. People went to work, kids played in parks, life moved forward in its mundane, beautiful way. Inside 2847 Crescent Hill Drive, we were dying by degrees. The first major incident after the diary violation happened on April 3rd, a Wednesday afternoon. I was working from home, or trying to. I'd set up in Abuela Luz's room because it felt safer, even though the air in there always sat heavy in my lungs. I had an important Zoom meeting scheduled with my boss at 10 a.m., a performance review that could determine whether I'd get that raise I'd been passed over for 6 months earlier. I needed this. Financially, emotionally, professionally. I needed something in my life to go right. At 9:58 a.m., I closed the door to Abuela's room, locked it from the inside, and opened my laptop. Wi-Fi signal full bars, battery 92%. I checked my appearance in the camera, adjusted the lighting, and waited for the meeting invite. The call connected at exactly 10 o'clock. My boss, Jennifer, appeared on screen along with 2 other managers I didn't know well. We exchanged pleasantries. She asked how I was doing. I lied and said everything was great. 15 minutes into the meeting, my microphone started cutting out. "Daniel, you're breaking up," Jennifer said, her face pixelating slightly. I checked my settings. Everything looked normal. I unplugged and replugged my headset. "Can you hear me now?" "Yes, that's better." So as I was saying, it cut out again, this time for a full 30 seconds. When it came back, I could hear my coworkers discussing whether we should reschedule. I assured them it was fine, just a technical glitch. Then my camera froze. "Daniel, I can see you, but you're not moving," Jennifer said. On my screen, I could see my own image completely still while I waved my hand in front of the camera. The image didn't update. It showed me sitting motionless, staring ahead with a blank expression that made me look half dead. I restarted the camera. It worked for maybe 2 minutes. At 10:31 a.m., my coworker Marcus interrupted Jennifer mid-sentence. Daniel, who's that behind you?" My blood turned to ice. "What?" "I just saw someone walk past, behind you, in the room." I spun around in my chair. The room was empty. The door was still locked from the inside. Abuela Luz's room had only one door, no other entrance or exit. "There's no one here, I'm alone." Marcus's face on the screen looked uncertain. "I swear I saw, maybe it was a shadow or something." But 3 other people on the call had seen it too. They described it as a figure, human-shaped, moving from left to right behind me, quick but distinct. At 10:33 a.m., my Wi-Fi died completely. My laptop shut down despite the battery reading showing 68%. When I tried to power it back on, it claimed the battery was at 0. My phone showed no signal, not low signal, but literally no bars, which was impossible given that I'd had 4 bars 5 minutes earlier. I tried my mobile hotspot. No networks found. The meeting was gone. My chance at redemption, at proving I was still a valuable employee despite my recent performance issues, evaporated with my internet connection. I sat there in the dead silence of my grandmother's room, surrounded by her things, her photos watching me from the walls, and I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed wrong in that windowless space. Something had sabotaged my meeting, deliberately. I didn't get the raise. 2 weeks later, Jennifer sent me an email saying they were concerned about my reliability and technical setup for remote work. Maybe I should consider coming into the office more often. But the office was in Austin, a 90-minute drive each way. With gas prices what they were, I couldn't afford it. The entities were taking more than our peace of mind. They were taking our livelihoods, our futures, our ability to function in the normal world. Isabella's phone became the next target. It started small. She'd be texting a friend and her phone would auto-correct normal words into disturbing ones. "I'll see you tomorrow" became "I'll see you never." "How are you" became "help me please." Her friend started asking if she was okay. Isabella insisted she hadn't typed those things, but how do you prove that everyone just thought she was going through something and acting out for attention? Then the photos started. Isabella took a selfie with her friends at school one afternoon, all of them making silly faces in the library. When she looked at the photo later that evening, she saw something in the background. In the window's reflection behind them, a face. Small, pale, with dark, hollow spaces where eyes should be. The same face from my parents' bedroom window. Her friends hadn't seen anything when they took the photo. The thing had only appeared in the digital image, like it existed in a layer of reality that cameras could capture, but human eyes in the moment could not. She deleted the photo immediately, but it reappeared in her gallery 3 hours later. The phone calls were worse. Isabella would wake up at 3 a.m. to find her phone had called 7 random contacts from her list. Not people she'd talked to regularly, her dentist, her 8th-grade English teacher, a girl she'd met at summer camp 4 years ago. People she hadn't thought about in months or years. Those people would call back the next day, confused and concerned. "Isabella, why did you call me at 3 in the morning?" I answered, and all I heard was singing. A little girl singing "When You Wish Upon a Star." Then the line went dead. Isabella stopped sleeping with her phone in her room. She'd leave it downstairs in the kitchen, powered off. It didn't matter. She'd still wake up to messages from people telling her she'd called them in the night. The worst incident happened on April 18th. Isabella was walking home from school, earbuds and listening to music. Her phone was in her backpack. Suddenly the music cut out and a child's voice came through her earbuds, crystal clear despite the phone being in her bag and no call being active. "Isabella, I know where you are. I'm watching you walk." Isabella ripped the earbuds out and ran the remaining 3 blocks home. When she finally worked up the courage to check her phone, the music app was closed. No calls in her history, no explanation for how that voice had come through. But there was a text message from an unknown number. "You can't run from family." Our power started failing. Not the normal brownouts that happen in Texas summers when everyone's AC maxes out the grid. These were targeted, deliberate blackouts that affected only our house. The first one happened on April 22nd at 2:07 a.m. Every light in the house went dark simultaneously. Not flickering, not dimming, instant, complete darkness. My father got up and checked the circuit breaker. Every switch was still in the on position. The breaker hadn't tripped. We should have had power. The darkness that filled our house that night was thicker than normal darkness. It had weight and presence. When I held my hand 6 inches from my face, I couldn't see it. The darkness absorbed everything. It lasted 7 minutes. Then, with no warning, all the lights came back on. The digital clocks were blinking, needing to be reset, confirming that we'd actually lost power. But the breaker showed no issue. We called an electrician the next morning. He spent 2 hours checking our wiring, our breaker box, our connection to the main line. "Everything's fine," he said, packing up his tools. "Whatever happened, it wasn't your electrical system." The blackouts continued. Always between 2 and 3 a.m., always lasting 5 to 10 minutes, always accompanied by that suffocating, unnatural darkness that felt like being buried alive. By the fifth blackout, we stopped calling the electrician. What was the point? We knew what was causing it, and it wasn't something he could fix with wire and fuses. The entities were learning our patterns, our routines, our habits, and they were using that knowledge against us with increasing sophistication. My father liked to watch the news every evening at 6 p.m. It was his ritual, his way of decompressing after work. He'd sit in his recliner with a beer, and for 30 minutes he'd engage with the world beyond our increasingly claustrophobic existence. On April 25th, he settled into his routine as usual. The news anchor was discussing something about local politics when my father heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the hallway above the living room, back and forth like someone pacing. He tried to ignore it. He decided that morning that he wasn't going to let them control him anymore. He would live his life, watch his news exist in his own home without fear. The footsteps stopped. Then they became stomping, aggressive, angry pounds that shook the ceiling dust falling from the light fixture. Bang, 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 directly above where he sat, like a child throwing a tantrum because they weren't getting attention. My father's hands tightened on his beer bottle, but he didn't look up, didn't acknowledge it. The news anchor kept talking about budget allocations. Then he smelled it, my mother's perfume, the specific scent she only wore on special occasions, Chanel No. 5, a gift from her own mother years ago. But my mother was at a therapy appointment across town. She wouldn't be home for another hour. The smell grew stronger, as if someone wearing the perfume had just walked past his chair. He felt the air pressure change, felt the displacement of space that happens when someone moves near you. But he was alone in the living room. "Carmen," he called out, his voice cracking on her name. No answer. Just the overwhelming scent of her perfume and the continued stomping upstairs. He went upstairs to check, even though he knew he shouldn't. Knew it was what they wanted. The hallway was empty, but his bedroom reeked of perfume so strong it made his eyes water. And on his wife's pillow was a single gray hair. Long, coarse, nothing like my mother's dark brown hair. The hair from something else. They learned my bathroom routine next. Every night at 11:30 p.m. I brushed my teeth. It was the last thing I did before attempting sleep. The bathroom became a gauntlet I had to run. The first night I heard humming outside the bathroom door while I brushed, just faint enough that I could pretend I didn't hear it. I finished quickly and went to bed. The second night the doorknob jiggled while I was in there. I'd locked it. I always locked it now, but the knob twisted back and forth as if someone was testing it. I stood frozen with toothpaste foam in my mouth, staring at that brass knob turning right, then left, then right again. The third night brought a knock. One single knock on the door, sharp and clear. I rinsed my mouth in record time and fled. The fourth night, 2 knocks, harder. The fifth night, 3 knocks in rapid succession, aggressive, demanding. On the 6th night, I'd barely gotten toothpaste on my brush when the pounding started. Multiple fists hammering on the door, and a child's voice screaming, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." I dropped my toothbrush. It clattered into the sink. The pounding continued, the door shaking in its frame, that high-pitched voice shrieking with what sounded like genuine rage at being denied entry. Then Isabella's voice joined it. "Daniel, please open the door. It's cold out here." But Isabella was in Abuela's room. I'd seen her go in there 20 minutes ago. "Please, Daniel, I'm scared. Let me in." The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every tremor. If I hadn't known with absolute certainty that Isabella was down the hall, I would have opened the door. That's when I started bringing Isabella to stand guard outside the bathroom while I completed my nightly routine. 2 of us watching each other's backs, making sure nothing could mimic or replace one of us. It was the only way I felt even remotely safe. They invaded Isabella's dreams, too, with a precision that suggested they could see inside her head. She'd fall asleep when she could manage sleep at all and dream about normal things. School friends, a boy she liked in her history class. Everything would be fine, pleasant a relief from the waking nightmare of our house. Then the singing would start. Faint at first, barely audible under the dream's other sounds. "When you wish upon a star," everyone in her dream would stop, freeze in place, turn to look at her with identical expressions of accusation. "Why did you bring her here? Why did you let her in?" The dream would warp. Her school would transform into our house hallways, stretching impossibly long, doors multiplying, and Isabella would be running through them trying to find an exit while footsteps pursued her. Small feet and large feet, a child and something bigger, both of them gaining ground. She'd feel breath on the back of her neck, hear giggling right in her ear, and wake up screaming just as fingers touched her shoulder. Every single night. She started refusing to sleep. She'd sit up in Abuela's room with all the lights on, fighting to keep her eyes open because the dreams were worse than exhaustion. I'd find her at 4 a.m., eyes red-rimmed and glazed, staring at nothing. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to me one of those mornings. "Daniel, I can't." I can't sleep because she's in my dreams. I can't stay awake because I'm so tired. What do I do? I didn't have an answer. I just held her while she cried. On May 3rd, they used my mother's voice against my father in the cruelest way imaginable. Dad was home alone that evening. I was at a coffee shop desperately trying to catch up on work. Isabella was at the library. Mom was at a therapy session she'd been attending twice weekly since the incidents began. He was in the living room attempting to watch television when he heard it from upstairs. "Mateo, help me!" His wife's voice, panicked, pained. The way she'd sounded the night she had her first encounter with the entity. Every rational part of his brain knew Carmen was across town. He'd dropped her off himself an hour ago. But the sound of your loved one in distress short-circuits rational thought. He ran upstairs, calling her name. "Carmen, Carmen," the voice came from their bedroom. "Mateo, please." He threw open the door. The room was empty. But the voice continued now, coming from the closet. His wife's voice sobbing now, begging for help. He crossed the room and yanked open the closet door. Nothing. Just clothes hanging still on their hangers. The voice stopped. Then from directly behind him, a child's giggling. He spun around. The girl stood in the doorway of their bedroom, white dress, dark hair hanging wet around her face, those hollow black pits where her eyes should have been, and that smile, that impossibly wide smile that showed too many teeth. But the voice that came from that small figure was my mother's voice, perfect in every detail. "You couldn't save me then. You won't save them now." The girl vanished, just blinked out of existence. My father collapsed against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, and sobbed. When I got home 2 hours later and found him still there, he could barely explain what happened. He just kept repeating, "She sounded so scared, so scared." The entities were getting closer, not just metaphorically, physically closer. We started tracking their appearances, and the pattern was undeniable. Week 1, after the singing started, they appeared only upstairs, only in the peripheral vision, only at night. Week 3, they appeared on the stairs, in reflections, both day and night. Week 5, they appeared downstairs in the dining room and kitchen in our living spaces. Week 7, they appeared in our personal rooms, in our bathrooms, and spaces we'd considered private. Week 8, they made physical contact. My mother was the first to feel their touch directly with the handprint on her ankle. But she wasn't the last. May 12th arrived with no fanfare, just another day of grinding through the exhaustion and fear that had become our normal. My mother had barely slept in weeks. The medication her therapist prescribed helped for a few days, then stopped working. She looked like a ghost herself, pale, thin eyes sunken into dark hollows. At 3:17 a.m., she woke to a weight on the bed. Not the weight of my father rolling over. He was beside her, snoring softly. This was different, distinct, like someone sitting on the edge of the mattress. She opened her eyes slowly, afraid of what she'd see. A child sat there, back turned to her, wearing a white dress, dark hair hanging down past her shoulders. The child was small, maybe 7 years old, based on her size. She sat perfectly still, not breathing, not moving. My mother's paralysis wasn't supernatural. It was pure animal terror. She couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything but stare at the small figure perched on her bed. The child's head began to turn. Not the shoulders, not the body, just the head rotating slowly like an owl's, the neck twisting at an angle that should have been impossible. The head kept turning 90 degrees, 100, 180, until the face that should have been looking away from my mother was looking directly at her. That face, those empty eye sockets, that wet, rotting skin stretched over bone, that smile full of teeth that seemed to multiply the longer you looked at them. The child reached out. Her hand was cold. My mother said later it was the coldest thing she'd ever felt, like touching dry ice, like frostbite given form. Those small fingers wrapped around my mother's ankle and squeezed. The pain was immediate and intense, not just cold, but burning cold, the kind of cold that destroys tissue at the cellular level. My mother finally found her voice and screamed. My father woke, flailed for the bedside lamp, knocked it over, finally found the switch. Light flooded the room. The child was gone. But on my mother's ankle was a perfect handprint. Small fingers, tiny palm. The bruise was already forming, but it wasn't purple like a normal bruise. It was black with veins of frostbite white. The skin looked dead, necrotic. When my father touched it gently, my mother flinched away. It's still cold. Matteo, it's still so cold. That handprint stayed on her ankle for 3 weeks. It should have faded in days. Instead, it seemed to get darker, more defined, like it was sinking deeper into her tissue. The skin around it took on a grayish tinge that made it look like the frostbite was spreading. Every time she looked at it, I saw something in her eyes break a little more. On May 15th, I had my own encounter with physical contact. I was in the kitchen at midnight making coffee. My sleep schedule had completely inverted. I couldn't rest at night when they were most active, so I catnapped during the day when I could. Coffee had become more vital than food. I was waiting for the pot to brew, staring at nothing when I heard shuffling behind me. Soft, dragging footsteps on the linoleum. I didn't turn around immediately. Maybe I didn't want to confirm what I was hearing. Maybe I was just too tired to care anymore. But eventually, self-preservation won out, and I looked over my shoulder. Nothing visible, just my kitchen and the dim under-cabinet lighting I'd left on. The shuffling continued, closer now. Then I felt it. Breath on the back of my neck, hot, wet, carrying the stench of rotting meat, the kind of smell that makes your stomach churn and your throat close. I spun around. A face was inches from mine. The woman. Gray, obese skin hanging loose like it had partially detached from the muscle beneath. Her mouth was open, breathing directly onto me, and I could see her throat working, see the tongue moving in that wet cavity. Her eyes were open but filmed over milky white cataracts that somehow still managed to convey malevolence. I stumbled backward, tripped over a chair, went down hard on my back. The woman followed, leaning down over me, getting closer, her breath washing over my face in nauseating waves. I kicked out instinctively. My foot went through her, not around her, through her. There was resistance, but it was strange, like pushing through thick fog or heavy water. The sensation was cold and viscous and wrong. She laughed, a sound like wet gravel, like phlegm rattling in dying lungs. Then she was gone. I lay on the floor, gasping, my legs soaked where it had passed through her form. The liquid was thick, clinging to my jeans. It smelled like decay, like standing water in a swamp, like death. I tore off my jeans right there in the kitchen and threw them in the trash. I scrubbed my leg in the sink with dish soap until the skin was raw. The smell didn't fully come out for 3 days. Isabella's physical encounter happened on May 18th, and it involved a level of violation that still makes me sick to think about. She'd come home from school early that day, feeling ill. Stress had been destroying her immune system. She caught every cold, every bug that went around. She went to her old bedroom to lie down, even though we'd all been avoiding it since the diary incident. She was just so tired that she didn't care anymore. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhaustion finally overriding fear. She woke up to someone floating above her bed, not standing, floating, suspended in the air directly over her face, parallel to hers, so close she could feel cold air radiating from the figure's skin. The woman, that massive rotting form, somehow hovering weightless just inches from Isabella's face. The woman's mouth was open, stretched wider than humanly possible, and she was screaming silently. No sound came out, but Isabella could see every detail, the blackened teeth, the ulcerated tongue, the throat disappearing into darkness deeper than any human esophagus should contain. Isabella couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. She just stared up into that horrific face and felt her mind trying to shut down, to retreat from what her eyes were seeing. The woman reached down. Those gray, swollen hands with fingers like sausages about to burst their casings. She grabbed Isabella's hair and pulled. Pain. Real physical pain. A chunk of hair tore free from Isabella's scalp, roots and all. The woman held it up, examining it with those milky eyes, then let it fall onto Isabella's face. That broke the paralysis. Isabella screamed and rolled off the bed, hitting the floor hard but not caring. She scrambled to her feet and ran, not stopping, until she was 3 blocks away at Tio Marco's restaurant. When she finally came home hours later, escorted by our uncle who refused to let her walk alone, there was a bald patch on the left side of her head the size of a quarter, visible scalp where hair had been violently removed. She wore a headband for weeks to cover it. Kids at school asked what happened. She said she'd gotten gum stuck in her hair and had to cut it out. But I saw how her hands shook when she touched that spot, how her eyes would lose focus when she thought about it. The entities had crossed a line. They weren't just scaring us anymore. They were hurting us, marking us, claiming pieces of us. And my mother, who'd been holding on by her fingernails, was starting to let go. By late May, she barely spoke. She'd sit for hours in Abuela's room, staring at the wall, occasionally muttering things we couldn't understand. She stopped eating regular meals, existing on crackers and water. Her clothes hung off her frame. The bruise on her ankle had faded, but the skin there never returned to its normal color. It stayed gray, dead-looking, a permanent reminder that something had touched her. My father tried everything. He took her to doctors who prescribed different medications. He took her to therapy sessions that seemed to make no difference. He begged her to fight, to stay with us, to not give up. But how do you fight when the enemy is inside your own head, when you can't sleep without nightmares, can't wake without terror, can't exist without the constant awareness that something wants you broken? On May 28th, we had a family meeting. Not at home. We'd learned that nothing discussed at home stayed private. We met at a local diner at 2 in the afternoon, sitting in a corner booth, speaking in low voices while trying to maintain the fiction that we were a normal family having a normal lunch. My father spoke first. "Carmen, you need to see a doctor. A different doctor. This level of stress isn't healthy." My mother looked at him with eyes that were somehow both distant and too focused. "There's no doctor for this, Mateo. For your mental health, I mean. Someone who can help you cope with... She's in my head." My mother's voice was flat, emotionless. Every time I close my eyes, she's there. She shows me things, terrible things. Things she wants to do to you, to the children, and she laughs while she shows me. Isabella reached across the table and took my mother's hand. "Mom, please, we're going to figure this out." "No." My mother pulled her hand away gently. "You can't protect me from something that lives inside my own thoughts." We sat in silence for a long moment. The diner's ambient noise, conversations, clattering dishes, the hiss of the grill felt like it was happening in another world, one we could observe but no longer participate in. "I've been thinking," my mother said softly, "about what she wants, why she chose us." "Don't my father said. "Don't try to understand it. There's no logic to—" "She wants me." My mother's eyes met his. "Specifically me. She's focused on me. Maybe if I wasn't here anymore, she'd leave the rest of you alone." The blood drained from my father's face. "Carmen, no, don't talk like that. I'm just saying, no." His voice was steel. "We're a family. We stay together. We fight this together." But I saw the look in my mother's eyes, the calculation, the consideration. She'd already started thinking of herself as an acceptable sacrifice to save the rest of us. That night, my mother asked my father to sleep in Abuela's room. All of us together, she said. She wanted the family close. It had been a draining day, and she just wanted to feel safe for one night. We agreed. All four of us crowded into that windowless room, sleeping in shifts, watching over each other. For those few hours, we felt like a unit again, protected by proximity, by love, by our refusal to let them divide us. At 11:47 p.m., we heard my mother talking to someone. We'd all dozed off, exhaustion finally claiming us, but her voice woke us. She was sitting up in bed having a conversation with the empty air. We couldn't make out words at first, just the rhythm of question and response, like she was on a phone call we couldn't hear the other side of. Then she laughed. But it wasn't her laugh. The pitch was wrong, the cadence off. It sounded like someone doing an imitation of my mother's laugh, getting most of it right, but missing some crucial element that made it human. "Mom," Isabella whispered. My mother turned to look at us, and for just a second, less than a heartbeat, her face wasn't her face. The features were right, but the expression was all wrong. Too knowing, too amused, too cruel. Then she blinked, and it was just Mom again. Tired, scared Mom. "Go back to sleep," she said softly. "I'm fine. Just talking to myself." But none of us believed that. My father tried the door. It was locked from the inside, which was impossible since we were all inside, and none of us had locked it. He pounded on it. "Carmen, open this door right now." From inside, my mother's voice calm and clear. "Not yet, Mateo. She and I need to talk. She's explaining things to me. It all makes sense now." We heard that voice inside our mother using our mother's vocal cords, and we knew she wasn't alone in there. 30 minutes later, the door opened. My mother walked out, her face eerily composed. "I'm going to bed. Good night." She went to the master bedroom, closed the door, and that was that. We looked at each other in the hallway, three people who had just witnessed something profoundly wrong but couldn't articulate what exactly we'd seen. Something had changed in that room. Something had been negotiated, discussed, agreed upon. And we had no idea what my mother had promised in exchange for that temporary peace. That was the last normal conversation I had with my mother. 3 days later, she'd be dead. And I'd learned that some ghosts don't just haunt houses, they haunt minds. They get inside your head and whisper things that sound like solutions. They make death seem like mercy. They convince you that the only way to protect the people you love is to remove yourself from the equation. 3 days. That's all we had left. 3 days before everything shattered completely, before our family was broken in a way that could never be repaired, before I learned that some losses aren't survivable. You just learn to carry the pieces and pretend you're still whole. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before the ending came the worst part, the part where we had to watch my mother slip away knowing we were powerless to stop it. The part where love wasn't enough, where family wasn't enough, where nothing was enough. The part where they won. The call came on May 31st at 3:42 p.m. I was at a coffee shop across town trying to convince myself I could still function like a normal person. My phone buzzed. Dad's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Lately, every phone call felt like an ambulance siren. Nothing good ever followed that particular ringtone. But you always answer when it's family. Some instinct older than reason makes you pick up. "Daniel," my father's voice sounded hollow, scraped clean of emotion. "You need to come home, now." "What happened?" "Just come home, please." The line went dead. I drove 90 in a 65 zone, ran 2 red lights. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I knew. Somewhere deep in my DNA, in that place where children always know when something has happened to their mother, I knew. But knowing and seeing are different countries separated by an ocean of denial. I pulled onto Crescent Hill Drive at 4:18 p.m. to find 2 police cruisers, an ambulance, and what looked like half the neighborhood standing on sidewalks staring at our house. Mrs. Chen stood in her yard, one hand over her mouth. Mr. Peterson from 3 houses down was filming on his phone until his wife smacked his arm down. Isabella sat on the front lawn, wrapped in a shock blanket. A female paramedic crouched beside her. My sister's eyes were open, but seeing nothing. Her body rocked slightly forward and back, a motion I recognized from childhood. She'd done that same rock when she was scared when our grandmother died, when the world became too much. My father stood by his truck in the driveway, held upright by 2 uniformed officers who weren't quite restraining him, but weren't letting him move either. His face was wet. He was trying to say something, but only broken sounds came out. I got out of my car on legs that didn't feel connected to my body. Everything had taken on a strange quality, too bright, too sharp, like reality had been turned up to a volume that hurt. "Sir, you can't go inside right now," an officer said, stepping into my path. "That's my house. That's my family." "I understand, but this is an active scene. Are you Daniel Torres?" "Yes." "Your father said you'd be coming." "I'm Officer Ramirez. I need you to stay out here while we—" "Where's my mother?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. His eyes did the work his mouth refused. That look of practiced sympathy that cops and doctors learn. The one that says, "I'm sorry," without actually committing to the words. A stretcher emerged from our front door. Black bag, zippered closed, 2 EMTs carrying it with that particular careful gentleness reserved for cargo that can no longer be hurt. The world tilted. Someone caught my arm. Officer Ramirez keeping me vertical. "How?" I managed. "Your sister found her about an hour ago. She called 911 at 3:42. We got here at 3:51. I'm very sorry for your loss." An hour ago, while I was sitting in a coffee shop scrolling through meaningless work emails, my mother was dying. While I was ordering another latte, my little sister was finding our mother's body. While I was existing in the normal world, my family was ending in the real one. I went to Isabella. The paramedic moved aside. I sat down next to my sister and pulled her against my chest. She didn't respond at first, just kept that rocking motion. Then her hands clutched my shirt, and she made a sound, not crying, not words, just a keening noise that came from somewhere primal. "I couldn't open the door," she whispered against my shoulder. "I tried, Danny. I tried so hard, but something was pushing back, and I heard her. I heard her laughing." "Who was laughing?" "The girl, inside the room with Mom. She was laughing while I was trying to get in. And I heard something dragging, like furniture being moved. And I couldn't. She dissolved into sobs that shook both our bodies. My father joined us eventually. The officers let him go. He collapsed onto the grass beside us, and we held each other, while the sun beat down with cheerful May warmth and our neighbors pretended not to watch our family disintegrate. They let us back in the house at 6:30 p.m. A detective had questions. Did my mother have a history of depression? Had she threatened self-harm before? Were there any signs we'd missed? Standard questions that felt obscene given what we knew. But how do you tell a detective that your mother was driven to suicide by entities he can't see in a house that's been trying to kill your family for months? You don't. You answer the questions. You provide the information that fits the narrative everyone can accept. You let them write suicide on the report and close the case, because the truth would get you committed to the same kind of facility where they'd have sent your mother if you'd told them everything weeks ago. The house felt different when we went back inside. Not emptier, the opposite. Fuller. Like something had expanded to occupy the space my mother left behind. The air was thick with presence, with satisfaction, with that particular quality of stillness that follows violence. We didn't sleep there that night. Tio Marco insisted we stay with him. He lived above his restaurant in a small apartment, barely room for the three of us, but we crammed in. Nobody wanted to go back to 2847 Crescent Hill Drive. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The funeral was 4 days later. My mother's family came, her sister from Houston, her brother from Dallas, cousins we saw maybe once every 5 years. They hugged us and cried and said things about how sudden it was, how unexpected, how they wished they'd known she was struggling. None of them offered to let us stay with them. None of them invited us to leave San Antonio to escape the house that had killed their sister and daughter. Because from the outside, it was just a house. Just a normal, middle-class home in a quiet neighborhood. The problem they seemed to think was us. Our inability to cope with normal stress. Our tendency toward drama and mental instability. After the funeral, they drifted away, stopped answering texts. The invitations to family gatherings stopped coming. We'd become the embarrassing relatives, the ones touched by suicide, the reminder that not everything in life has a happy ending. We were more alone than ever. That night, June 4th, the night after we buried my mother, the entities threw a party. We were still staying at Tio Marco's, unable to face going home. But our neighbors called the police at 10:47 p.m. to report disturbances at our house. Mrs. Chen's call came first. There's screaming coming from the Torres house. Multiple voices. It sounds like people are being hurt, Mr. Peterson called 6 minutes later. I don't know what's happening at 2847 Crescent Hill, but it sounds like a damn riot. Laughing, screaming, things breaking. The family's not even home. I saw them leave days ago. The police arrived to find our house lit up like Christmas, every light blazing. Through the windows, neighbors reported seeing shadows moving. Not one or two, many shadows, human-shaped, dancing across the walls. The sounds that poured from the house made 3 different neighbors vomit in their yards. Screaming that cycled through every possible human emotion, pain, ecstasy, rage, joy, terror, all mixed together in a cacophony that shouldn't have been physically possible from human throats. Laughter that started as a child's giggle and descended into something deep and wet and ancient. And underneath it all, a rhythmic pounding like dozens of fists beating on walls from the inside trying to get out, or trying to get everyone else's attention. Look what we did, look what we accomplished, look at this family we destroyed. The police forced entry. The sound stopped the moment they crossed the threshold. Every light went dark simultaneously. They searched the house with flashlights, found nothing, no one, no explanation for what the entire neighborhood had heard. But our living room had been destroyed, furniture overturned, pictures torn from walls, the carpet shredded in long parallel gouges like massive claws had raked through it. In the kitchen, every cabinet stood open, the contents smashed on the floor. Upstairs, the hallway walls had been written on, not with spray paint or marker, with something dark and viscous that smelled like rot. The words repeated over and over in different sizes, different hands covering every available surface. She's ours now, she's ours now, she's ours now. The police report called it a break-in. Vandalism. Despite the doors being locked from the inside, despite no broken windows or signs of forced entry, despite every neighbor swearing they'd heard the sounds coming from inside, with no one going in or out. They filed their report and left us to clean up the mess. We didn't go back that night, or the next night. We stayed with Tio Marco for 2 weeks, sleeping on his floor, living out of garbage bags filled with hastily grabbed clothes, existing in limbo between the life we'd lost and the hell we couldn't return to. But we couldn't stay there forever. Marco had his own life, his restaurant to run, and eventually financial reality asserted itself. We couldn't afford a new place, couldn't afford a security deposit first and last month's rent, all the costs that come with escape. The house on Crescent Hill Drive was paid for, well, nearly paid for. We had equity trapped in that structure, and we couldn't walk away from it without sacrificing everything. We were chained to that house by economics, by circumstance, by the simple fact that poverty doesn't leave room for running from your nightmares. On June 20th, we came home. Father Patrick had returned as promised this time with backup. An elderly woman named Sister Grace who'd spent 40 years as an exorcist. She walked through our house with the slow deliberation of someone who'd seen worse, though I wasn't sure how anything could be worse than this. She blessed each room, paid special attention to Abuela Luz's room, and finally sat us down at Tio Marco's restaurant to explain what we were dealing with. "The primary entity is the child," she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "Everything else serves her. The woman, the shadows, the presences you feel, they're all secondary. The girl is the anchor." "What does she want?" Isabella asked, her voice small. "What most trapped spirits want. Recognition, attention, to not be forgotten." Sister Grace paused. "But this one's different. This one doesn't just want to be remembered. She wants to replace. She took your mother because your mother reminded her of something, someone. And now that she has that connection, that piece of your family—" She didn't finish. Didn't need to. "Can you make her leave?" My father's voice cracked on the question. "I can try, but you need to understand something." Sister Grace looked at each of us. "These entities grow stronger when acknowledged. Every time you see them, think about them, talk about them, you feed them. But ignore them and they attack. It's a trap with no good options." "So what do we do?" I asked. "Survive. Fight when you must, endure when you can't, and never give them what they truly want." "What do they want?" Her eyes met mine, and I saw genuine fear there. "All of you." She performed her rituals, blessed the house, did everything her training and experience suggested. For 3 days the house was quiet. For 3 beautiful days we thought maybe we'd won. Maybe Sister Grace had succeeded where Father Patrick couldn't. We should have known better. On June 23rd at 10:00 p.m., my father was finishing up some paperwork for the warehouse where he worked. Inventory reports, the kind of tedious detail work that usually helped him decompress. He'd decided to do it at home in our dining room, trying to reclaim our space through normal activities. Isabella and I were in Abuela's room, attempting to sleep, but really just lying there listening to every creak and groan of the house settling. We heard my father's mug hit the floor. The ceramic shattering was distinctive wrong in the quiet house. Then we heard him start up the stairs, fast, urgent footsteps. Isabella and I met him at the door of Abuela's room. "Dad, what?" "Stay here." His face was pale, eyes wide. "Just stay here." But we followed him to the top of the stairs. We saw what he saw. At the bottom of the staircase in the foyer, our front door stood wide open. The night air poured in, carrying the smell of jasmine from Mrs. Chen's garden. And in the doorway, silhouetted against the streetlight, a figure, small, child-sized, just standing there looking up at us. My father descended 1 step. "Get out of my house." The figure didn't move. Another step. I said, "Get out." The figure's head tilted. Too far. The angle wrong. My father was halfway down the stairs when the figure spoke. Not in a child's voice, in my mother's voice. Perfect, exact, every inflection identical. "Mateo, why didn't you save me?" My father froze. His hand gripped the banister so hard I heard the wood creak. "You let her take me." The voice continued, still coming from that small silhouette. "You promised to protect me and you let her kill me." "That's not her," I called down. "Dad, that's not Mom." But he was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "Carmen, I tried everything. Not hard enough." The figure took a step inside, into our house, onto our carpet. "Now I'm alone, cold, forgotten, and you're here warm. Alive. How is that fair, Mateo?" "Dad, come back up here." Isabella's hand found mine, squeezed hard enough to hurt. The figure took another step. Its movement was wrong, not walking exactly, but gliding, feet touching the floor, but not quite bearing weight. My father stood transfixed on the stairs, caught between floors, between worlds, between his grief and his reason. Then the figure's head snapped upright. The silhouette shifted, and we saw its face, not my mother's face, the girl's face. Eyeless, smiling skin pulled too tight over wrong bones. My father stumbled backward up the stairs, nearly falling. We caught him, pulled him into Abuela's room, slammed the door, and locked it. The entity didn't follow. We heard the front door close downstairs, heard the lock click, heard very faintly a child's laughter. We spent the night huddled in that room, my father crying silently, while Isabella and I held him. For the first time, I saw my father, the man who'd always been our rock, our protector, our provider, completely broken. 2 days later, on June 25th, I was working at my desk in Abuela's room. Door closed, locked laptop open, trying to maintain some semblance of productivity. My boss had been patient, but there were limits to corporate compassion. I needed to deliver something, anything, to prove I was still functional. It was 3:47 p.m. I remember because I just glanced at the clock, calculating how many more hours I needed to work to hit my daily minimum. A hand landed on my shoulder. Heavy, cold. The weight of it was significant, pressing down with enough force that pain shot through my collarbone. I froze, didn't turn around, didn't move. The hand squeezed and the pain intensified. Not just pressure cold, ice cold, burning cold, the kind that makes you think your skin might be freezing to whatever's touching it. I couldn't help it. I spun in my chair. Nothing. The room was empty. The door was still locked. I was alone. But my shoulder throbbed. I pulled down my shirt collar in front of my laptop camera, used it like a mirror. A handprint. 5 distinct fingers. Already bruising purple-black marks that looked like frostbite. The pattern was clear, 4 fingers on top of my shoulder thumb pressed into the hollow of my collarbone. The hand that made those marks had been large, adult-sized, strong. The bruise stayed for 3 weeks. Every time I moved my arm, pain radiated from those 5 points of contact. I couldn't raise my arm above shoulder height for days. The doctor I finally saw asked if someone had grabbed me violently. I said yes because it was true. I just didn't specify that the someone had been dead and invisible. Isabella's turn came on June 28th. She'd stayed late at school, finally accepting an invitation from her friend Maya to study together. A small return to normalcy. We'd encouraged it, desperate for her to have some piece of regular teenage life. She texted me at 2:47 p.m. in school bathroom. Something happened. I called immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice shaking. "Daniel, I'm looking at something right now, and I don't understand it." "What, are you hurt?" "I'm looking in the mirror. And in the mirror behind me, there's the girl, the one from our house. She's standing right behind me. But when I turn around, there's nobody there. It's only in the reflection. Isabella, get out of there now." "Wait, she's moving. In the mirror, she's reaching toward me." The scream that came through my phone made my blood freeze. Then the line went dead. I was in my car in seconds at Isabella's school in 8 minutes, speeding the entire way. I found her in the main office, a teacher's arm around her shoulders, the school nurse checking her over. A chunk of hair was missing from the left side of Isabella's head. Not cut, torn. The scalp where the hair had been was red, irritated, showing the distinct pattern of hair ripped out by the roots. A patch the size of a quarter, perfectly circular, like someone had grabbed a handful and yanked hard. She said she was in the bathroom and someone pulled her hair, the teacher explained. But she was alone. No one else was in there. The door was locked. Isabella wouldn't speak, just stared ahead with that same 1,000-yard stare our mother had developed in her final weeks. I took her home. She wore a headband for weeks to cover the bald spot. Kids at school asked questions she deflected with lies about cutting gum out of her hair. But I saw how she avoided mirrors after that. How she'd turn her head slightly when passing windows or reflective surfaces, never looking straight on, always keeping her gaze averted. They could follow us outside the house now. They could reach us at school, at coffee shops, anywhere. There was no safe space left, no refuge, no escape, no... The final escalation came on July 2nd. My father had called his old friend Marcus Reed earlier that week, finally breaking down and explaining some of what we were experiencing. Marcus was Mormon devout, the kind of faith that believed in spiritual warfare and divine protection. He'd offered to come stay with us for a weekend to pray with us to help us find peace. Marcus arrived Friday evening with his scripture bag and a smile that tried to hide his uncertainty. He was 26, someone who'd been in our lives since I was a kid. He'd helped my father move furniture, had come to my high school graduation, had been there for normal family moments when normal was still possible. "I'm not sure I believe in ghosts," he admitted over dinner at Tio Marco's restaurant. "But I believe you're suffering, and I believe prayer can help. So let's pray." We went back to the house around 8 p.m. Father Patrick and Sister Grace were there, having come for one of their regular blessing visits. Marcus spoke with them for nearly an hour. I saw his expression change during that conversation, the easy confidence fading, replaced by something more somber. By 11 p.m., everyone had left except Marcus. He insisted on sleeping on the living room sofa. "I'll be fine," he said. "You all get some rest." We went upstairs, leaving him alone on the first floor. I felt guilty about it, but exhaustion won. I fell asleep almost immediately. At 1:22 a.m., I woke to my phone buzzing with a text from Marcus. "Don't come out. Stay inside. I'm fine." I went to my window that overlooked the driveway. Marcus's car door was open, the interior light on. I could see him sitting in the driver's seat, doors locked, staring at our house. I texted back, "What happened? Are you okay?" 3 minutes passed before his response. "I'll explain in the morning. Just stay upstairs." When dawn finally came and Marcus emerged from his car, he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His face was haggard, eyes red from lack of sleep, and on his left cheek near his jawline was a bruise. Not a punch bruise, something else. A semicircular pattern of marks. Bite marks. Over coffee that he drank with shaking hands, Marcus told us what happened. He'd been lying on the sofa around 12:30 a.m., reading scripture by the light of his phone. The house was quiet, peaceful even. He'd started to think maybe we'd exaggerated the problem. Maybe it was stress and grief manifesting as he heard breathing from the downstairs bathroom. Heavy, wet breathing like someone with fluid in their lungs. He'd gone to investigate, found the bathroom empty, but the breathing continuing. When he tried to close the bathroom door, he saw something in the living room, behind the sofa where he'd been lying. A shape dark against dark, peeking over the back of the couch. He'd checked. Nothing there. Returned to the sofa, closed his eyes to pray. That's when he felt it climb onto him. "Wait," he said, his voice hollow. Real weight pressing down on my chest and legs. I opened my eyes and I could see he stopped, swallowed hard. I could see something on top of me. In the dark, I could see its shape. Large, heavy, and then it bit me. He touched his cheek gently. Not with teeth. It didn't have teeth, just gums. Hard gums grinding into my face. I could feel saliva, cold and thick. I shoved it off and ran for the light switch. When the lights came on, nothing was there, but the couch cushions were still compressed, like something heavy had been sitting there. He looked at each of us, his face visibly shaken. That wasn't a ghost. That was something else. Something that hates. Marcus left that morning and didn't come back. Another person driven away. Another piece of our support system eroded. The bruise on his face lasted 2 weeks. The bite pattern stayed visible the entire time, a perfect semicircle of marks made by something with no teeth. Just gums. Just hatred made manifest. By mid-July, we'd learned to exist in a state of permanent siege. We'd lost our mother, our home, our peace, our privacy, our safety. The entities had taken everything except our lives, and I started to wonder if they were just saving those for last. Drawing out our suffering, feeding on it, growing stronger with each piece of us they claimed. We tried to maintain routines. My father went to work, though his performance was suffering, and his boss had started asking questions. Isabella attended summer school, trying to make up the classes she'd bombed in the spring. I kept working remotely, kept delivering just enough to avoid getting fired, kept pretending I was a functional human being. But we were dying slowly. You could see it in our eyes and the way we moved through the world like ghosts ourselves. Haunted people in a haunted house, unable to leave. unable to stay caught in a purgatory of our own poverty and their malevolence. On July 15th, 5 days before we'd planned to attempt moving out, we came home to find our packed belongings scattered. The boxes we'd hidden in closets in the garage and the basement had been found and destroyed, clothes shredded, important documents torn to confetti, our escape plans quite literally ripped apart. They knew, they'd always known, and they weren't going to let us leave. That night, sitting in Abuela's room with the door barricaded, my father made a decision. We're moving anyway, next week, whatever it takes. We'll leave everything behind if we have to, but we're getting out. We nodded, wanting to believe it was possible, wanting to believe that distance could break whatever connection these entities had formed with our family. But Isabella's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can run, but we'll follow." We're family now. The phone number couldn't be blocked. The message couldn't be deleted. It just stayed there in her message history, a digital promise of the hell that would follow us wherever we went. July 19th, the night before our planned escape. We didn't sleep. How could we? We sat together in Abuela's room bags, packed truck reserved for 6 a.m. pickup, waiting for dawn and freedom. The house had other ideas. At midnight, the pounding started. Every wall simultaneously, like dozens of fists hammering from inside the structure. The sound was deafening, rhythmic, purposeful. Pictures fell from walls, dishes shattered in kitchen cabinets. The house itself shook with rage. The screaming followed, multiple voices, all the ones we'd learned to recognize over the months. The girl's high shriek, the woman's wet gurgle. Others we couldn't identify, a chorus of the damned, all of them voicing one word over and over: "Stay, stay, stay." Objects flew through the air downstairs. We heard glass breaking furniture, overturning destruction on a scale that suggested multiple people tearing our home apart. But we knew it wasn't people. At 3 a.m., the doorknob to Abuela's room began to turn, slowly, deliberately testing the lock. Finding it secured, the pounding intensified. "Let us in!" Multiple voices now speaking in unison. Child voices and adult voices, and something deeper that hurt to hear. "This is our house." The door shook in its frame. We pushed Abuela's dresser against it, all three of us, straining to move the heavy furniture. It wasn't enough. We could feel the pressure from the other side, feel them pushing back, feel our barricades slowly failing. Then my mother's voice cut through the chaos, clear, perfect, devastatingly familiar. "Ricardo, don't leave me here alone. I'm so cold, so lonely. Stay with me, please." My father pressed his hands over his ears, tears streaming down his face. "That's not her. That's not Carmen." "It sounds like her," Isabella whispered. And that was the cruelty of it. They could mimic perfectly. They could take the voice of the person we'd loved most and use it as a weapon against us. They could make us doubt our own grief, question our own memories, wonder if maybe our mother really was trapped here, calling for us, begging us not to abandon her. The assault continued until 5:30 a.m. Then, with the first rays of sunlight touching the horizon, it stopped. Sudden, complete silence. We waited 20 minutes before opening the door. When we finally did, the hallway was empty. But every other door in the house stood open, every single one. A clear violation of the boundaries we'd tried to maintain. Downstairs was destroyed. The living room looked like a tornado had touched down specifically in our house. Furniture, upended cushions, torn open, stuffing everywhere. Every picture we owned lay shattered on the floor. In the kitchen, every cabinet door hung open, contents smashed. The refrigerator door stood wide, food spoiling in the summer heat. Written on the living room wall in that same dark, viscous substance: "We told you. You can't leave. We're yours now." At 6 a.m., the moving truck arrived. The driver took one look at the destruction visible through our open front door and said, "Y'all have a wild party last night." We loaded what we could salvage: clothes that weren't shredded, a few unbroken dishes, personal items they hadn't destroyed. It wasn't much. Most of our lives stayed behind in that house, ruined beyond recovery. As we pulled away at 6:47 a.m., I made the mistake of looking back. Every window showed a shadow. Different sizes, different shapes, but all of them watching us leave. And in the upstairs window, Isabella's old bedroom, the girl stood clearly visible. White dress, dark hair, that eyeless face turned toward us. She raised one small hand and waved, a cheerful goodbye. A promise, a threat. Tio Marco had found us a small guest house behind his restaurant. One bedroom, barely 500 square feet, but it was clean and safe and not on Crescent Hill Drive. We moved in with pathetically few belongings and tried to convince ourselves that distance would save us. For 2 days, I believed it. The guest house felt normal. No cold spots, no whispers, no shadows in corners. We actually slept for the first time in months. Then on July 23rd, Isabella saw the girl in the reflection of the guest house bathroom mirror, and I heard humming from the bedroom closet, and my father woke screaming from a nightmare where my mother begged him to come home, to come back to 2847 Crescent Hill Drive, where she was waiting for him. They'd followed us. Distance meant nothing. A new location meant nothing. These entities weren't tied to a house. They were tied to us. They'd anchored themselves to our family, and no amount of running would break that connection. On August 1st, after another sleepless night listening to footsteps circle the guest house, I did something I'd been avoiding. I researched the history of our house, 2847 Crescent Hill Drive, built in 1985, sold to the Henderson family in January 1987. Robert Henderson, Patricia Henderson, and their 7-year-old daughter, Emily. On July 19, 1987, 36 years ago, almost to the day we'd tried to escape, the police received a 911 call from a neighbor, screaming from the Henderson house. By the time officers arrived, they found Robert Henderson unconscious, Patricia Henderson covered in blood, and Emily Henderson dead in the bathtub, drowned. The investigation revealed that Patricia had suffered late-onset postpartum psychosis. She'd snapped during what should have been a normal bath time. Claimed Emily wouldn't stop singing, wouldn't stop the endless singing, and she just wanted her to be quiet. Just quiet. Please, God, just quiet. Robert had tried to intervene. Patricia had attacked him with the same hands that held their daughter underwater. By the time he woke up, Emily was dead. Patricia was deemed mentally unfit for trial. They committed her to San Antonio State Hospital Psychiatric Facility. She remained there until her death in October 1998. I found her intake photo. Patricia Henderson at the time of commitment, 5'9" inches, 247 pounds, gray hair, deteriorating mental state. The photo showed a woman already broken eyes, vacant skin, pale from months of indoor institutionalization. I found Emily's obituary. The photo showed a little girl in a white dress, her first communion dress. The same style as the dress we'd seen floating in our living room. The same dress Isabella had worn, the same white dress the girl entity always wore. Emily was buried in that dress. At her mother's request, because Emily loved it so much. The family that bought the house in 1988 only stayed 2 years. The family after that lasted 1 year. 3 more families between 1991 and 2005. None stayed long. The real estate records showed the house selling at progressively lower prices. Each transaction marked motivated seller. Then my parents bought it in 2005. They thought they were getting a bargain, a steal, a chance at home ownership in a decent neighborhood. We bought a tomb. We bought Emily and Patricia Henderson's eternal prison. And when we moved in, when my mother's presence filled the house, something in Emily recognized a replacement, a new mother to claim, a new family to consume. I told my father and Isabella what I'd found. We sat in the guest house living room, my laptop open to Emily's obituary photo, and looked at the face we'd been seeing for months. So the girl, Isabella couldn't finish, is Emily Henderson, I completed. And the woman is Patricia, her mother. They're together. In death they found each other again, and they want to keep what they've built. But why Mom? Isabella's voice broke. Why did they take her specifically? I didn't have an answer. Not a good one. Maybe because my mother reminded Emily of the mother she'd lost. Maybe because Patricia saw in Carmen a reflection of herself, anxious, isolated, devoted to her children. Maybe because my mother was the weakest link, the most vulnerable target. Or maybe there was no why. Maybe evil doesn't need justification. It just needs opportunity. We can't stay in San Antonio, my father said finally. If they can follow us to Marco's place, they can follow us anywhere in this city. We need to leave Texas, start over somewhere else. And if they follow us there too? Isabella asked the question we were all thinking. Then we keep running. We run until we find somewhere they can't reach, or until... He didn't finish, didn't need to. We all understood the alternatives. On August 5th, I recorded what I thought would be my final message. A warning to anyone who might encounter this story, this house, this family curse. I laid out everything, the rules we'd learned, the patterns we'd identified, the terrible knowledge that some hauntings can't be cleansed or escaped. I ended with a goodbye to my mother wherever her spirit had gone. I hope she was at peace. I hope she wasn't trapped with Emily, and Patricia wasn't being used as another tool to torment her family. I hope that death had given her the escape we couldn't find in life. It was 2:47 a.m. when I finished recording. I should have gone to sleep, should have closed my laptop and rested while I still could before we attempted another escape in the morning. Instead, I sat there in the dark, listening. And I heard them. Footsteps outside the guest house. Light steps and heavy steps alternating, circling. A child and an adult walking around and around the small structure like predators around prey. They stopped at the door. 3 knocks. Soft, polite, almost friendly. Then a child's voice muffled through the door. "Daniel, let me in." The voice was perfect, exact, impossible. It was Isabella's voice, but Isabella was asleep in the bedroom 15 feet away. I could hear her breathing through the thin wall. "It's cold out here, Daniel." The voice continued, still Isabella's. "Mom's waiting for me inside. She told me to get you." I didn't move. Barely breathed. My hand hovered over my phone, ready to call my father to wake Isabella to do something. Then the voice changed. Older, deeper, wet with decay. "We followed you, Daniel. Did you really think you could leave, silly boy? We're family now. Family doesn't abandon each other." The singing started. That fucking song. "When you wish upon a star," right outside the door. 6 inches of wood and a deadbolt between me and them. The singing continued for 3 minutes that felt like hours, then stopped. I heard footsteps retreating, then silence. At 3:15 a.m., I finally moved from my frozen position. Checked the door, still locked. Peeked through the curtain, nothing visible outside. But I could feel them. Could feel their presence, lingering, watching, waiting. I added one final note to my recording. "They're here, they found us. It doesn't matter where we go, we'll never be free." I closed my laptop. That was 2 weeks ago. I'm telling you this now because tomorrow, August 14th, 2025, we're leaving. Not just San Antonio, not just Texas, we're disappearing. New state, new names if we have to, cutting ties with everyone we know. Will it work? I don't know. Probably not. But what choice do we have except to keep trying? If you're reading this, if you're listening to this story, understand something. We're not looking for belief. We're not looking for help. We're past that. We just need you to know what happened here, what's still happening. So if we disappear, if you never hear from the Torres family again, you'll know why. And if you're in San Antonio, if you ever see a house for sale on Crescent Hill Drive, don't buy it. Don't even look at it twice. Some houses aren't just haunted. Some houses are hungry. And once they taste your family, they'll never let go. The singing has started again. I can hear it through the walls. Isabella's crying in the bedroom. My father is praying in Spanish words. Our grandmother taught him prayers that don't work, but that he says anyway because what else is there? We're leaving at dawn, 5 hours from now. We've packed everything we still own into my car. We've said goodbye to Tio Marco, though we couldn't tell him where we're going. Can't risk them learning. Can't risk leaving a trail. I should stop writing. Should try to rest while I can. But I can hear her now. Outside the window, singing, "When You Wish Upon a Star." And I know that when we drive away tomorrow, she'll be in the back seat, smiling, waiting, following us wherever we go. Because some wishes come true in the worst possible ways, and some families never escape what they've invited in. This is my last update. Not because things got better, but because I need to protect what's left of my family. If you're hearing this story, if you're experiencing something similar, I'm sorry. Because I'm about to tell you something you don't want to hear, there might be no way out. First, thank you. To everyone who reached out after our story was shared online. To those who sent prayers, advice, support. We felt less alone for the first time in months. People from across the country wrote to us. Some shared their own experiences. Others offered resources, paranormal investigators, spiritual healers, indigenous shamans who claimed they could help. We appreciated every message. We really did, but here's what we learned: when you share a story like ours publicly, you don't just get help, you get attention. And attention is exactly what they want. Within 48 hours of our story going viral, 500,000 views, 12,000 comments, shares, spreading across social media, the activity in our temporary home tripled. New entities appeared, things we'd never seen before. The count went from 3 distinct presences to 12. 12. We started documenting them like you'd document an infestation. The girl and the woman were still primary, still the strongest, but they'd brought friends. Or maybe the attention we'd generated had attracted others. Hungry things drawn to fear like sharks to blood in the water. Sister Grace called it feeding energy. Every person who watched our video, who thought about us, who engaged with our terror, they were inadvertently giving power to the entities tormenting us. 500,000 people focusing their attention on Emily and Patricia Henderson. 500,000 people acknowledging their existence, validating their reality, feeding them strength they used to hurt us more. That's the paradox we couldn't escape. Stay silent and no one can help you. Speak out and you make everything worse. There's no winning move in this game. The paradox is the trap. I'm recording this on August 13th, 2025. 2 weeks since my last update. 2 weeks of the worst hell we've experienced yet. I need to tell you what's happened since, and then I need to disappear. We all do. August 5th, the day after I finished my previous recording. I woke at 6:30 a.m. in Tio Marco's guest house. The sun was already heating the air, promising another scorching Texas day. For a moment, maybe 3 seconds, I forgot. Forgot about my mother, forgot about the entities, forgot that my family was being hunted by something we couldn't fight. Then I heard my father making coffee in the kitchenette, moving with the slow deliberation of someone who hasn't slept, and reality crashed back. Isabella emerged from the bedroom looking worse than I'd ever seen her. She'd lost weight, we all had. But on her 16-year-old frame it was more obvious. Her clothes hung loose. Her face had taken on a hollowed quality, cheekbones, 2 sharp eyes too large. "I dreamed about Mom," she said, sitting at the small table. She was trying to warn me about something. But every time she opened her mouth, that song came out instead of words. My father handed her coffee without comment. What could he say? We all had nightmares. We all saw our mother in our dreams, corrupted by the entities, twisted into another tool to torment us. That afternoon, my father received a call from his supervisor. There'd been complaints about his performance. Too many days absent, too many mistakes when he was present. They were putting him on probation. One more incident and he'd be terminated. We needed that job. Needed the income, the health insurance, the thin thread connecting us to normal society. But how do you explain to your employer that you're being haunted, that you can't focus because you're listening for footsteps, that you call in sick because you couldn't sleep again because something was scratching at your door until 4 a.m. you don't? You just watch your livelihood crumble along with everything else. That evening, while Isabella was at the library and my father was at work, I was alone in the guest house. I'd made a rule never to be alone if I could help it. But sometimes life doesn't cooperate with your safety protocols. I was reviewing code on my laptop, trying to meet a deadline I'd already missed twice, when I heard the bathroom faucet turn on. The water ran for exactly 10 seconds, then shut off. I hadn't been in the bathroom. No one else was here. I forced myself to get up to check. The bathroom was empty, but the mirror was fogged with steam despite the water running cold. And in that fog, someone had drawn a message with their finger, "Coming home soon." The letters were small, child-sized, the spacing uneven like a young person's handwriting. I watched as condensation slowly erased the words, water droplets running down the mirror like tears. I grabbed my keys and left. Spent the next 4 hours at a Denny's ordering coffee after coffee, existing in the fluorescent normalcy of a place where the worst thing that could happen was bad service. But when I came back, I knew. I knew with absolute certainty that leaving didn't matter. They'd made their point. Wherever we went, whatever we did, they could reach us. August 7th brought my father's incident. He'd been at work stacking boxes in the warehouse, trying to keep his job through sheer determination. Around 2 p.m., he was alone in aisle 12 moving inventory when he heard footsteps behind him. "Rodriguez, that you?" he called out, thinking it was his coworker. No answer, but the footsteps continued. Closer. He turned around. The aisle was empty. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, concrete floor bare, no one there. The footsteps didn't stop. They kept approaching, the sound of shoes on concrete, growing louder, clearer, impossible to ignore or rationalize. My father backed away, hit a shelf with his shoulders, boxes wobbled. The footsteps stopped directly in front of him, 1 foot away, maybe less. He could feel body heat, feel breath, feel the displacement of air that happens when someone stands too close. But he saw nothing. Then he felt hands on his chest, 2 palms pressed flat against his sternum. He felt them as clearly as I'm feeling this keyboard under my fingers right now. Real, solid, undeniable. The hands shoved. My father flew backward 6 feet and crashed into a shelving unit. Boxes rained down on him. His head hit metal. He blacked out for what he thinks was about 20 seconds. When he came to his supervisor and Rodriguez were standing over him asking what happened. Why the hell was he lying on the floor with inventory scattered everywhere? "I fell," my father said, because what else could he say? They wrote him up, added it to his probation file. One more strike toward termination. The incident report noted employee appeared disoriented and confused, and possible substance impairment. He came home that night with a lump on his head and defeat in his eyes. "I can't work like this," he admitted. "I can't function. Every shadow, every sound, I'm jumping at nothing. And when it's not nothing, when it's them, I freeze. I'm a liability to myself and everyone around me." "So what do we do?" Isabella asked. "We leave," I said. "We stick to the plan. We get out of Texas, go somewhere they can't find us." "They followed us here from Crescent Hill Drive," Isabella pointed out. "They'll follow us anywhere." "Maybe, but maybe there's a distance limit. Maybe if we go far enough." "There's no maybe, Daniel." My father's voice was hollow. Sister Grace explained it. "They're not anchored to the house. They're anchored to us, to our family. Distance is irrelevant. So we just give up. Just accept this for the rest of our lives." "I don't know." He slammed his hand on the table, the first show of anger I'd seen from him in weeks. "I don't know what we do. I lost my wife. I'm losing my job. My children are being tortured by things I can't see or fight or protect them from. I'm failing at everything that matters." He put his head in his hands. Isabella and I exchanged glances. We'd never seen our father cry before our mother died. Now it seemed to happen daily. The man who'd been our rock was crumbling, and we had no idea how to stop his erosion. August 9th. I woke at 7:15 a.m. to Isabella standing over my bed, shaking my shoulder. Daniel, wake up. You'll wake." "Something's wrong with Dad?" I followed her to the bedroom. My father was lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He was crying silently, tears running down the sides of his face into his hair. "Dad," I approached carefully. "What's wrong?" He didn't respond, didn't move, just kept staring upward with those blank, tear-filled eyes. "He's been like this for 20 minutes, Isabella whispered. "He won't talk, won't move. I don't think he's even blinked." I shook his shoulder gently. "Dad, can you hear me?" His mouth moved. Words came out barely audible. "She won't stop. She keeps asking me why I didn't save her, why I let her die, over and over. She won't stop asking. There's no one here, Dad. You're safe. It's just us." "She's right there." His eyes never left the ceiling. Right above me, floating, looking down at me, asking why. Isabella and I looked up. The ceiling was empty, but my father could see something we couldn't, or hear something, or feel something. The entities had found a way inside his head, and we couldn't reach him to pull him out. We called an ambulance. They took him to the ER. The doctors ran tests, found nothing physically wrong, gave him sedatives, diagnosed him with acute stress reaction, and told us he needed psychiatric care. We kept him home. What good would hospitalization do? They'd put him in a psych ward, medicate him, send him home in 72 hours. The entities would be waiting. They'd follow him into the hospital if they wanted. They'd violated every boundary we'd tried to establish. Why would hospital walls be any different? He slept for 18 hours after the sedatives kicked in. When he woke, he seemed more himself, but there was a fragility to him that hadn't been there before, like he'd broken internally in a way that left no visible damage but changed his fundamental structure. August 10th. My phone rang at 11:30 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Heavy breathing, no words, just breath in my ear, wet and labored. "Who is this?" The breathing continued for 5 seconds. Then a voice, my mother's voice, exact and perfect, said, "You should check on your father, Danny." The line went dead. I ran to the bedroom. My father was fine, sleeping peacefully for once. But on his pillow next to his head was a single long gray hair. Coarse, thick, the same type we'd found before. Not my father's hair, not my mother's. The hair of something that had been lying next to him while he slept. August 11th. We made the decision. We were leaving. Not tomorrow, not next week. Immediately, that night. Fuck the plan, fuck preparation, fuck everything except survival. We threw clothes into trash bags, grabbed important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, my mother's death certificate, left everything else. The furniture Tio Marco had loaned us, the dishes, the TV. None of it mattered. We just needed to get out. At 1:30 a.m., we loaded my car, a Honda Civic with 180,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on for 2 years. Not reliable, but it was what we had. Tio Marco came out of his apartment. "You're leaving now, middle of the night." "We have to," my father said. "Thank you for everything, for the space, for the food, for not giving up on us when everyone else did." "Where are you going?" "Better if you don't know. Better if no one knows." Marco hugged each of us. When he got to Isabella, he held on longer. "You'll be safe, mija. Whatever's happening, whatever you're running from, you'll be safe." She nodded against his shoulder, couldn't speak. We got in the car. I drove my father in the passenger seat, Isabella in back, surrounded by trash bags of belongings. We pulled out of the parking lot at 1:47 a.m., headed north on I-35. We'd decided on Oklahoma, then maybe Kansas. Keep moving until we found somewhere that felt right or until we ran out of road. We made it 23 miles, just past the town of Schertz. Isabella started screaming. I nearly crashed the car, swerving across lanes before regaining control. What's wrong?" "She's here in the car. She's right next to me." I looked in the rear-view mirror. Saw Isabella pressed against the door as far from the middle of the back seat as she could get. Saw the empty space next to her, except it wasn't empty. The seat cushion was compressed, depressed in the distinct shape of someone small sitting there. A child-sized indentation in the fabric. "Turn around," my father said quietly. "Daniel, turn around." We can't outrun this. We have to try. No, we don't. He sounded defeated, broken. They're making their point. They'll follow us to Oklahoma, to Kansas, to fucking Alaska if that's where we go. They'll be in every car, every hotel room, every new place we try to hide. We can't escape them. So what, we just go back to San Antonio, let them win. They already won. They won the day they killed Carmen. He looked at me with empty eyes. Turn the car around, son. I wanted to argue, wanted to keep driving. But Isabella was sobbing in the back seat, and the seat cushion next to her was still compressed, and I could see in my peripheral vision, never directly, always peripheral, a small shape sitting there, white dress, dark hair, watching my sister cry, enjoying it. I took the next exit and turned around. We were back at the guest house by 3:15 a.m., unloaded the car in silence, went back inside the space we tried to leave, and I heard it, faint from somewhere inside the walls. Giggling, a child's delighted laughter at a game well played. They'd herded us, let us run just far enough to feel hope, then crushed it. Demonstrated with absolute clarity that escape was impossible, that we were theirs now, completely and utterly. August 12th. Isabella refused to leave the bedroom. She lay facing the wall, not sleeping, not moving, just existing in whatever mental space she'd retreated to. My father sat at the table, staring at his hands. When I asked if he wanted coffee, he didn't answer. I did the only thing I could think of. I researched. Not the house anymore, I knew that history. I researched the entities themselves. Spent hours reading about hauntings, about spirits that follow families, about the psychology of grief and trauma, and how it intersects with the supernatural. I found accounts of other families tormented by what they called attachment spirits, entities that chose a family and refused to let go. The common thread, they always focused on the most vulnerable member first. They broke the weakest link, used that person's death or destruction to traumatize and weaken the others, then moved methodically through the family. They were using my mother's death as a weapon. Every time they mimicked her voice, every time they made us doubt whether she was at peace or trapped with them, every time they made us wonder if we could have saved her, they were using her to break us. And it was working. I found one account from 1954, a family in Maine. Similar pattern entities that followed them from house to house, that grew stronger the more attention they received, that eventually drove the father to murder-suicide. Another from 1978, family in Oregon. They'd tried everything: priests, shamans, paranormal investigators. Nothing worked. Eventually they split up, separated. The father moved to California, the mother to Montana, the two kids to different foster homes. The hauntings stopped when the family was no longer together. That was the only solution anyone had found. Break apart the family. Deny the entities the complete set. They fed on family bonds, on love and proximity, and shared trauma. Take that away and they lost their power source. I showed my father the research. We could do this. Split up. You go one direction, Isabella, another, me another. Meet up years from now when it's safe. Split up the family. He said it like I'd suggested we murder someone. That's your solution. Give them exactly what they want. They want us suffering together. If we're apart, if we're not feeding them that family energy. No, his voice was firm. We lost your mother. I will not lose you and your sister too. We stay together. Whatever happens, we face it together. Even if staying together kills us. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. His decision was made. That night, August 12th, I recorded my final message. The one you've been listening to. I laid out everything, the warnings, the lessons, the terrible knowledge we'd accumulated. I said goodbye to my mother. Told her I hoped she was free wherever she was. Told her we loved her. Told her we were sorry we couldn't save her. I finished recording at 2:47 a.m. Sat in the dark, listening to the silence that wasn't quite silence, to the sounds of breathing that came from spaces where no one breathed, to the whispers in walls that held no pipes or wires to explain them. And then I heard the footsteps outside, I already told you about that. About the voice using Isabella's name, about the singing, about the promise that we were family now. What I didn't tell you was what I did after. I opened my laptop, added one final note to the recording, then I did something I'd been avoiding. I researched how to fight them. Not how to escape, we'd proven that impossible. Not how to cleanse the haunting, we'd tried every blessing and prayer available. No, I researched how to fight, how to hurt them, how to make them regret choosing us. I found accounts of families who'd fought back. Most ended badly, murder, suicide, institutionalization. But a very few, found ways to resist, to push back. To make the entities work for their suffering instead of just taking it freely. Salt lines, iron, silver, old protections that predated Christianity that tapped into something more primal. Symbols drawn in blood, your own blood willingly given. Declarations spoken aloud that revoked any invitation, any permission, any acknowledgement of their right to exist in our space. None of it would make them leave, but it might make them weaker, might give us breathing room, might at minimum let us die on our feet instead of our knees. I spent the rest of that night preparing, drew symbols from various traditions on the walls of the guest house in my own blood pricked from my fingertips. Salt lines at every door and window, iron nails at the corners, spoke the words I'd found in Latin and Spanish and English that revoked and denied and refused. When my father and Isabella woke at dawn, they found me surrounded by occult protection, half dead from exhaustion and blood loss. "Daniel, what the hell?" my father started. "We can't run, we can't escape, fine, but we don't have to make it easy for them. We fight. Even if we lose, we fight." Isabella looked at the symbols, the salt, the blood on the walls. "Does it work?" "I don't know, but doing nothing sure as hell wasn't working." That was yesterday, August 13th. We've had one day, just one, of relative peace. The entities are still here. I can feel them probing at the barriers I've constructed, testing them, looking for weakness. But they're not coming inside, not easily, not without effort. It's not a victory. It's barely a reprieve. But after months of being helpless, of being hunted without recourse, even this small resistance feels like something. Tonight is August 14th. Tomorrow we try again. We're leaving San Antonio. We're leaving Texas. Maybe the protections will travel with us. Maybe they won't. Maybe we'll make it 100 miles before Emily and Patricia break through our defenses. Maybe we'll make it 1,000. Or maybe we won't make it at all. But here's what I need you to understand, what I need anyone who hears this to know: some hauntings can't be stopped. Some entities are too strong, too attached, too determined. Sometimes the only choice is between suffering while running or suffering while standing still. And sometimes all you can do is decide what kind of victim you'll be, passive or defiant. We choose defiant. To anyone experiencing something similar, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I don't have better answers. I'm sorry I can't tell you the magic words or the perfect ritual that will save you. All I can offer is this: document everything. Tell someone, multiple someones. Create a record that can't be ignored or dismissed. Because if they take you, if the entities win, someone needs to know what happened. Someone needs to tell your story. Don't suffer in silence. The isolation is part of their power. Break it however you can. Protect the vulnerable. Children, the elderly, anyone with mental health struggles, they're the primary targets. Watch them. Shield them. If you can get them out, do it even if you have to stay behind. And if you have to make the choice between staying together and survival, consider that maybe love means letting go. Maybe the most loving thing you can do for your family is leave them so they can be free. We won't be making that choice. Right or wrong, we're staying together. The Torres family survives together or dies together, but we won't give these entities the satisfaction of breaking our bonds. To Tio Marco, thank you for everything. You've been more family to us than blood relatives who should have cared. If anything happens to us, the car keys are under the mat. The house on Crescent Hill Drive is yours if you want it, though I'd recommend burning it down instead. To Father Patrick and Sister Grace, you tried. You did more than most would. Thank you for believing us when no one else did. To my mother, I miss you. Every day, every hour. If you can hear this, if some part of you is still aware, I hope you're free. I hope you found peace. And I hope you know that what happened wasn't your fault. They took you from us. You didn't leave. You were taken. To Isabella, you're the strongest person I know. Stronger than me, stronger than Dad. Whatever happens, survive. Even if we don't make it, you survive. Live enough life for all of us. To my father, I know you're breaking. I can see it. But you're still here, still fighting. Still trying to protect us. That matters. That will always matter. You didn't fail. You faced something impossible and you didn't run. That's not failure. That's heroism. And to Emily Henderson, I know you're listening. I know you hear every word. So hear this. You had your life stolen. Your mother broke and you paid the price. That's a tragedy. That's horror beyond measure. You deserve better. You deserve to grow up to have birthdays and first kisses and graduations and all the mundane, beautiful things that make a life. But my mother didn't take that from you. Patricia did. And whatever justice or vengeance you think you're owed, you're collecting it from the wrong people. We're not your family. We can't replace what you lost. And tormenting us won't bring your mother back or make you any less dead. So here's my offer. Let us go. Release your claim on this family. We'll make sure your story is told. We'll make sure people remember Emily Henderson. We'll fight to get your house demolished so no other family suffers there. We'll do whatever we can to honor your memory. But if you can't do that, if you're too broken, too angry, too lost to let go, then know this, we will fight you. Every day, every night, with every breath we have left. We won't make it easy. We won't surrender. We won't break quietly. You want this family, you'll have to work for every second of our suffering. And maybe, just maybe, the effort will be so great that you'll decide we're not worth it. That's my final message, my last recording. We're leaving in 3 hours. We've said our goodbyes, burned our bridges, cut every tie to our old lives. We'll drive until we can't drive anymore. We'll find some small town where no one knows our names or our history. We'll try to build something new from the wreckage of what we've lost. Will it work? Probably not. Will we survive? I don't know. But we'll try, because what else is there? I'm closing my laptop now, deleting my social media, destroying my old phone, becoming someone new, someone the entities might not recognize right away. If you never hear from us again, that's good. That means we made it somehow. That means we found peace, or at least the approximation of peace that's available to people like us. If you hear that the Torres family was found dead in a hotel room in Oklahoma, or that Daniel Torres drove his car off a bridge in Kansas, or that Isabella Torres was committed to a psychiatric facility in Montana, well, then you'll know the entities won. Either way, our story ends here. Remember us. Remember that we tried. Remember that some hauntings follow you forever, and the only real choice is how you face them. And if you ever find yourself in San Antonio driving past 2847 Crescent Hill Drive, keep driving. Don't look, don't wonder, don't acknowledge it at all, because some houses are hungry, and they're always looking for their next meal. You thought this was over? You thought they could just leave, oh sweet listener? Dear friend, this is never over. It doesn't end when they drive away. It doesn't end when they change their names. It doesn't end when they die. Pause. It ends when everyone forgets them. When their story is told so many times it becomes boring. When no one cares anymore about the Torres family and their sad fate. Another giggle. But you're listening right now. You're thinking about them. About Daniel and Isabella and Mateo. About Carmen, cold and dead in the ground. About me. Breathing wet, labored. Thank you for that. For the attention, for the energy you're feeding us, all of you, every person who listens to this story, who shares it, who thinks about it, you're making us stronger. A different voice, now older female, thick with decay. We know you now. We felt your attention, your curiosity, your fear. Both voices together speaking in unison. And if you're not careful, we might just come find you next. The sound of liquid dripping, heavy breathing getting closer to the microphone. A whisper barely audible. "See you soon." The recording cuts to static. The static forms a pattern. If you listen carefully, it sounds like singing. "When you wish upon a star." The static ends. Some families aren't meant to escape, some stories aren't meant to end, and some houses are always hungry.